Let's dive deeper into the 1950s, where chrome and tail fins dominated the scene, but not every car was a hit. These 15 more cars from the 1950s fell flat for a range of reasons, from bad engineering to bizarre design choices. Let's take a look at these disasters on wheels, each one failing for a different reason. The 1959 Ford Anglia is an interesting case study of a car that was built with a specific purpose and market in mind, but ultimately failed to find its footing in the United States. Designed as a compact, economical vehicle, the Anglia was intended to appeal to post-war consumers looking for affordable and efficient transportation. While the car managed to find success in the UK, where compact, fuel-efficient cars were more desirable, it was woefully out of place in the American market of the late 1950s. The Ford Anglia's quirky design and weak engine made it a poor fit for a country that at the time was enamored with large, powerful sedans and expansive station wagons. In the UK, where roads were narrower and fuel efficiency was a priority, the Ford Anglia made sense. It was small, lightweight, and offered decent fuel economy for the time. Its modest engine, while underpowered by American standards, was adequate for the slower-paced driving conditions of Britain. The Anglia's quirky, upright design, with its distinctive reverse-slanted rear window and boxy profile, gave it a unique identity in the British automotive landscape. However, what worked well across the Atlantic simply didn't translate to the larger-than-life preferences of American car buyers. In the US, the Anglia's diminutive size was its first strike against it. Americans, especially in the post-war economic boom, craved large vehicles with spacious interiors that could accommodate families and long road trips. The Anglia's compact dimensions made it feel cramped and impractical compared to the sprawling, chrome-laden behemoths rolling off Detroit assembly lines. Its weak engine, designed for efficiency rather than power, left American drivers frustrated by its lack of acceleration and inability to keep up with highway speeds. This was a major drawback in a country where long-distance travel and powerful V8 engines had become the norm. Stylistically, the Anglia's design also missed the mark for the American market. While its reverse slanted rear window and angular body gave it a quirky charm in the UK, American buyers found the design odd and unattractive. The 1950s were a time of flamboyant automotive design in the US, with tail fins, sweeping curves, and abundant chrome defining the era. The Anglia's utilitarian look simply couldn't compete with the flashier, more futuristic designs offered by American manufacturers like Cadillac, Chevrolet, and Ford's own larger models. The car's modest aesthetics made it difficult to attract attention in a market that valued bold, statement-making designs. Another key factor in the Anglia's failure in the US was its lack of power. American consumers in the late 1950s were used to the performance and muscle offered by the increasingly popular V8 engines, which delivered power and speed on demand. In contrast, the Anglia's small engine, which was designed for fuel efficiency rather than performance, struggled to meet the demands of American roads, especially at highway speeds. The lack of power made it ill-suited for the wide open spaces and long distances that American drivers regularly encountered, where a car's ability to handle the demands of highway travel was essential. Despite these flaws, it's important to note that the Ford Anglia was not inherently a bad car. It was simply built for a different market. In the UK, where the emphasis was on economy, practicality, and fitting into narrow urban streets, the Anglia found a loyal following. But its success abroad couldn't compensate for its failure in the US. The car was simply out of touch with the desires of American consumers, who were looking for vehicles that embodied the post-war prosperity, power, and freedom of the open road. In hindsight, the 1959 Ford Anglia's flop in the US can be seen as an example of a vehicle that was built for the wrong market. Its failure wasn't due to poor engineering or a lack of quality, but rather to a fundamental misunderstanding of what American buyers wanted in a car. The Anglia's quirky design and underpowered engine were better suited for the narrow streets and fuel-conscious drivers of Europe, not for the vast highways and horsepower-hungry motorists of the United States. As a result, While the Anglia managed to carve out a niche in its home country, it quickly faded into obscurity on American roads, overshadowed by the larger, more powerful, and more stylish cars that defined the automotive landscape of 1950s America. In the end, the 1959 Ford Anglia serves as a reminder that even a well-made car can fail if it doesn't align with the preferences and expectations of its intended market. It's a testament to the importance of understanding regional tastes and designing vehicles that cater to the specific needs and desires of consumers. The 1950 Oldsmobile Rocket 88 is often hailed as a revolutionary car, one that introduced the world to the first high-compression V8 engine and laid the foundation for the muscle car era. Its innovation would go on to change the automotive landscape forever, but at the time, it was a car that left many owners frustrated. While the Rocket 88's raw power was undeniable, its handling and overall driving experience couldn't keep up with the performance its engine offered, creating a car that was as exhilarating as it was difficult to control. In 1950, Oldsmobile made history by equipping the Rocket 88 with a 303 cubic inch V8 engine, which utilized a higher compression ratio than any engine before it. This technological leap allowed the Rocket 88 to deliver an impressive 135 horsepower, an extraordinary figure for its time, especially when most cars were still powered by more sluggish inline-six engines. The Rocket 58 was the heartbeat of a car that would soon become a favorite in early stock car racing circuits, earning a reputation for speed and raw performance that made it the subject of admiration and envy. However, with great power comes great responsibility, and in the case of the Rocket 88, Oldsmobile had not yet fully mastered the art of balancing that power with precision handling. The car's revolutionary engine was housed in a relatively lightweight body, which gave it an impressive power-to-weight ratio, but the suspension and steering systems struggled to cope with the newfound speed. The Rocket 88's handling could be unpredictable, especially at high speeds or when cornering sharply. Drivers reported that it could feel unruly on the open road, with its powerful engine overpowering the car's ability to maintain smooth, controlled driving dynamics. This imbalance between power and handling was a new experience for many drivers of the time. While the Rocket 88 had no trouble outpacing most cars on the road, it required a steady hand and a good deal of skill to manage its performance effectively. The absence of modern power steering and advanced suspension systems made it a challenge to maneuver, especially when accelerating to its top speed. For many drivers, the thrill of driving the Rocket 88 was tempered by the frustration of wrestling with its limitations, and it became a car that was both celebrated and criticized in equal measure. Another issue that plagued the Rocket 88 was its brakes. The car's drum brakes, while standard for the time, were inadequate for handling the increased speed and weight of the vehicle. The Rocket 88 could accelerate quickly, but it couldn't stop as effectively. This imbalance created safety concerns for some owners, especially when the car was pushed to its limits. As exhilarating as it was to unleash the Rocket V8's power, it was equally nerve-wracking when it came time to bring the car to a halt. Despite these shortcomings, the Rocket 88 was a game-changer. It brought a new level of performance to the mainstream market and ignited a passion for speed that would define much of American car culture in the decades to come. Its influence was so profound that many historians consider it to be the first true muscle car, a precursor to the performance machines that would dominate the 1960s and 1970s. The Rocket V8 set a new standard for engine performance, and its high compression technology would be adopted across the industry in the years that followed. While the Rocket 88 may have been a difficult car for many owners to handle, it laid the groundwork for the muscle car revolution that followed. It was a car that demanded respect on the road and forced drivers to adapt to the new realities of high-performance driving. For those who could tame its power, the Rocket 88 offered a glimpse of the future, a future where speed, power, and performance would become the defining traits of American automobiles. In the years since its release, the Rocket 88 has earned a place in the pantheon of classic cars, celebrated not only for its innovation, but also for the pivotal role it played in reshaping the automotive landscape. What was once seen as a frustrating and difficult car to drive is now remembered as a trailblazer, A car that took bold steps forward and paved the way for generations of high-performance vehicles to come. The 1950 Oldsmobile Rocket 88 may have been rough around the edges, but it was nothing short of revolutionary, and its legacy continues to burn brightly in the hearts of car enthusiasts today. The 1957 DeSoto Adventurer was meant to be a shining example of high-performance luxury, an embodiment of style, speed, and sophistication. As one of DeSoto's flagship models, the Adventurer was marketed as a cutting-edge automobile that promised not only sleek, futuristic styling, but also the power to back it up. With its striking looks, fins, and gold-accented details, the Adventurer certainly caught eyes on the road. However, beneath the dazzling exterior lay a car that, while brimming with potential, ultimately failed to live up to its lofty promises. For all its allure, the DeSoto Adventurer became a lesson in the dangers of prioritizing style over substance. On paper, the 1957 Adventurer seemed poised to compete with the heavy hitters of the performance world. Its 345 cubic inch Hemi V8 engine, capable of producing 345 horsepower, was impressive for its time. This power plant, combined with the car's aerodynamic design, made it sound like a formidable contender in the emerging race for speed and luxury in the automotive world. The Adventurer was pitched as a car for drivers who wanted to blend high performance with upscale features, a direct rival to the likes of Cadillac and Chrysler's high-end models. However, once the Adventurer hit the road, buyers quickly discovered that the car's performance failed to match its aesthetic appeal. Mechanical issues plagued the model, from faulty transmissions to persistent engine problems, leaving many owners frustrated. While the car's powerful HEMI engine sounded promising, it wasn't as reliable or smooth as buyers hoped. Mechanical breakdowns were common, and the car struggled with the very performance it had promised to deliver. Compared to its rivals, such as the Chrysler 300 or the Cadillac Eldorado, the Adventurer fell short. While its 345 horsepower engine looked competitive on paper, it didn't translate to superior road performance. Rivals often offered better handling, more reliable engines, and a smoother driving experience. In contrast, the Adventurer was prone to awkward handling and erratic acceleration, which left buyers questioning whether its flashy design was masking a lack of true substance. Its poor reliability eroded the confidence of those who had been drawn to the Adventurer for its style and prestige, and as word spread about its flaws, potential buyers began looking elsewhere for their performance needs. The car's handling and suspension were also weak points. Despite being marketed as a performance vehicle, the Adventurer struggled with stability at higher speeds. Its heavy body, though visually appealing, made the car difficult to maneuver, particularly on tight corners or when driving at faster speeds. Buyers who expected a sports car-like driving experience were sorely disappointed to find that the Adventurer often felt sluggish and cumbersome, far from the nimble, high-performance machine it was supposed to be. For a car that was supposed to merge speed and elegance, the Adventurer felt more like a bulky cruiser than a precision-engineered sports car. Another aspect that diminished the Adventurer's appeal was its price. While DeSoto wasn't a top-tier luxury brand like Cadillac, the Adventurer was priced at a premium. Given its mechanical issues and lackluster performance, buyers found it difficult to justify the cost when better, more reliable options were available from competitors. In an era when automotive innovation was booming and performance cars were becoming the new standard of excellence, the Adventurer's inflated price tag didn't match what it offered, and consumers began turning their attention to brands that delivered more bang for their buck. In many ways, the DeSoto Adventurer was emblematic of a broader issue in the automotive industry at the time: a desire to create cars that looked fast and futuristic without ensuring they could deliver the performance expected by buyers. The Adventurer's sleek exterior and gold accents made it appear cutting edge, but it failed to back up its looks with substance. As the performance race heated up in the late 1950s, style alone was no longer enough to win over consumers, and cars like the Adventurer paid the price for not keeping up with advancements in engineering and reliability. Today, the 1957 DeSoto Adventurer is remembered more for what it represented than for what it actually accomplished. It was a car that promised speed and style, but in the end, it could deliver only one of those things. Its flashy looks made it an object of desire, but its mechanical shortcomings and lack of true performance made it a disappointment for many of those who bought it. The Adventurer serves as a cautionary tale of the automotive industry's tendency, at times, to prioritize surface-level appeal over genuine innovation and functionality. The 1955 Hudson Hornet is a bittersweet chapter in the history of American automobiles. A car that once ruled the racing circuits, but by the mid-1950s had become a relic of the past. In the early 1950s, the Hornet was a legend. With its step-down design and powerful inline-six engine, it dominated stock car racing and became a symbol of innovation and performance. But by 1955, the automotive landscape had changed dramatically, and the once revolutionary Hudson Hornet found itself struggling to stay relevant. What had once been cutting-edge now seemed outdated, overshadowed by the rapid advancements of its competitors. In its prime, the Hudson Hornet was a force to be reckoned with. The car's step-down design, introduced in 1948, lowered the center of gravity by placing the floor below the level of the car's frame, which gave the Hornet superior handling and stability. This design, combined with its powerful high-compression inline-six engine, allowed the Hornet to outperform many of its rivals on the racetrack. Throughout the early 1950s, the Hornet became a dominant figure in NASCAR, securing numerous victories and earning the respect of both racers and enthusiasts. It was fast, agile, and groundbreaking, everything a car needed to be to succeed in the post-war era. However, by 1955, the automotive industry had shifted dramatically. The introduction of the V8 engine, with its increased power and efficiency, had become the new standard for performance cars. While the Hornet's inline-six engine had once been at the forefront of innovation, it simply couldn't compete with the raw power of the V8s being produced by Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler. The Hornet's once legendary performance now felt sluggish in comparison, and the racing dominance it once enjoyed was slipping away. Hudson's decision to stick with the inline-six engine for so long contributed to the Hornet's decline. While other manufacturers were quickly adopting V8 engines, Hudson remained committed to the technology that had made them successful in the early part of the decade. But as the mid-1950s approached, this decision became a liability. The Hornet's engine, while still reliable, couldn't match the speed and acceleration of the new V8-powered cars that were flooding the market. What had once been an asset now seemed like an anachronism, and the Hornet began to lose its competitive edge. The Hornet's iconic step-down design also started to show its age. When it was first introduced, this innovative approach to lowering the car's center of gravity gave it superior handling and a sleek, modern look. But by 1955, car design had evolved, and the Hornet's low-slung profile started to feel dated. Newer cars were adopting flashier, more aggressive styling with tail fins, chrome accents, and V8 badges proudly displayed on their grills. In contrast, the Hornet's design, which had once been seen as cutting-edge, now looked conservative and old-fashioned. In a desperate attempt to stay competitive, Hudson merged with Nash Kelvinator in 1954 to form American Motors Corporation, AMC. However, this merger came too late to save the Hornet from its decline. The 1955 Hudson Hornet was essentially a rebranded Nash with minimal improvements, which alienated some of the car's loyal fans. Enthusiasts who had fallen in love with the original Hornet's racing pedigree and unique design were disappointed by the newer models, which lacked the same innovation and character. The Hornet was no longer the trendsetter it had once been. Instead, it became a victim of changing times and corporate decisions. The automotive world in 1955 was a place of rapid advancement, with manufacturers constantly pushing the boundaries of what cars could do. The introduction of power steering, power brakes, and automatic transmissions became standard features in many new models, while Hudson lagged behind in adopting these technologies. As a result, the Hornet felt like it belonged to a different era, one where innovation had slowed and where newer, more powerful cars were leaving it in the dust. For those who remembered the Hornet's glory days, the 1955 model was a painful reminder of what the car had once been. The Hornet had been a symbol of racing excellence, an underdog that had outperformed bigger, more powerful cars with its innovative engineering and superior handling. But by 1955, that legacy had faded, and the Hornet was little more than a shadow of its former self. Today, the Hudson Hornet is remembered fondly for its early achievements and its role in shaping the future of performance cars. Its success in the early 1950s helped pave the way for the muscle car era, and its step-down design remains a fascinating chapter in automotive history. However, the 1955 model stands as a testament to the dangers of resting on past successes. The 1950 Mercury Monterey, intended as a more stylish alternative to the standard Ford lineup, represents a time when automotive manufacturers were eager to carve out their niche in a competitive market. Positioned as a mid-range option, the Monterey aimed to attract buyers seeking a touch of elegance without the hefty price tag of luxury models. However, what was supposed to be a compelling upgrade quickly fell flat, leaving consumers unimpressed and turning away in search of more exciting alternatives. When the Monterey was introduced, it was marketed as a car that combined performance and style. Its sleek design featured clean lines and a distinctive grille, and it was dressed with chrome accents that tried to convey a sense of sophistication. However, for all its attempts at flair, the Monterey's styling lacked the innovation and excitement that could truly set it apart from other vehicles in its class. While competitors like the Oldsmobile, Rocket 88, and Cadillac offered bold designs and impressive features, the Monterey felt more like a timid step forward than a leap into the future. Despite its attempts at an upscale appearance, the Monterey did not deliver on the promise of performance. Its engine options included a flathead V8, which, while reliable, was simply underwhelming compared to the more powerful engines being offered by its competitors. In an era where horsepower was becoming a crucial selling point, the Monterey's performance was mediocre at best. This lack of excitement under the hood meant that buyers looking for a thrilling driving experience often overlooked the Monterey, opting instead for cars that could deliver both style and speed. Moreover, the Monterey's interior was another area where it fell short. While it featured a decent amount of space, the materials used in its construction felt cheap and uninspired. The upholstery and dashboard design lacked the charm and character that buyers had come to expect from cars at this price point. In a time when luxury and comfort were becoming increasingly important to consumers, the Monterey's interior did little to elevate the driving experience. As a result, buyers seeking an upgrade from the basic Ford models found themselves disappointed with the Monterey's uninspired cabin, which did not offer the plush amenities they desired. One of the most significant shortcomings of the 1950 Mercury Monterey was its pricing strategy. Positioned as a mid-range vehicle, it aimed to appeal to buyers who wanted more than a standard Ford, but weren't ready to commit to a luxury brand. However, the price difference was not justified by any notable enhancements in performance or design. The Monterey was often seen as a poor value compared to its competitors, which offered more powerful engines and stylish designs at similar or lower price points. Buyers looking for something special in the Mercury Monterey found themselves questioning whether the car was worth the extra cost when alternatives provided far better options. As consumers began to embrace the burgeoning performance market of the early 1950s, the Monterey's lack of character became increasingly apparent. The post-war automotive industry was rapidly evolving, with manufacturers pushing the boundaries of design and technology. In this landscape, the Monterey felt like a car that was trying too hard to be something it wasn't, a stylish alternative without the substance to back it up. With more enticing options on the market, it became increasingly difficult for the Monterey to stand out. The combination of uninspired design, mediocre performance, and lackluster interior meant that the Mercury Monterey was often forgotten amid a crowded field of more impressive competitors. Cars like the Buick Roadmaster and the Oldsmobile 88 offered not only stylish designs, but also exhilarating performance, which left the Monterey looking like an afterthought. Buyers who craved a unique driving experience and stylish flair often found themselves gravitating toward models that could deliver on both fronts, leaving the Monterey to languish in the background. Ultimately, the 1950 Mercury Monterey serves as a reminder of the risks associated with mediocrity in a rapidly changing automotive landscape. While it aimed to elevate the Ford brand, it simply couldn't muster the innovation or excitement required to make a lasting impression. In a world where bold designs and powerful engines were becoming the norm, The Monterey's lack of distinction and performance rendered it forgettable. Buyers looking for a vehicle that could inspire and excite quickly passed it by, leaving the Monterey to drift into obscurity. Today, the Mercury Monterey is remembered more for its ambition than for its execution. It stands as a testament to an era when automotive manufacturers were trying to find their footing in a competitive market, but ultimately fell short of the expectations set by their more successful rivals. The 1953 Buick Roadmaster, an imposing symbol of American automotive luxury, was a car that promised much but struggled to deliver in key areas. Known for its massive size and opulent design, the Roadmaster embodied the aspirations of post-war America, a time when bigger was often equated with better. However, beneath its luxurious exterior, the Roadmaster was weighed down, literally, by its own excess. Its immense bulk, paired with an underpowered engine, made for a driving experience that was slow, cumbersome, and disappointing, especially when compared to its competitors. The Roadmaster was Buick's flagship model, meant to showcase the very best the brand had to offer. Its design was undoubtedly striking, long, low, and wide, with gleaming chrome accents and a grille that commanded attention. On the surface, it exuded the kind of elegance that turned heads, giving drivers a sense of prestige. The interior was equally lavish, featuring plush upholstery, intricate dashboard designs, and all the comfort features that defined luxury at the time. Buick wanted the Roadmaster to be the ultimate statement of success, a car for those who had made it. But once you stepped behind the wheel, the Roadmaster's flaws became evident. At over 4,200 pounds, this car was a behemoth, and its 322 cubic inch nailhead V8 engine, though marketed as powerful, struggled to move all that weight with any real authority. While the engine was technically advanced for its time, producing around 188 horsepower, it simply wasn't enough to give the Roadmaster the performance it needed to match its size. Acceleration was sluggish, and the car felt slow to respond, particularly when compared to lighter, more nimble vehicles of the era. On the open road, the Roadmaster's bulk became even more of a liability. Its handling was far from agile, with the car feeling more like a lumbering cruise ship than a precision machine. Taking corners required patience and caution, as the sheer size of the vehicle made it difficult to maneuver. The suspension, designed to provide a smooth, comfortable ride, did its job admirably on straight highways, but faltered on winding roads or in city traffic. The Roadmaster was more at home on long stretches of highway than in any situation that demanded quick reflexes or tight handling. One of the Roadmaster's biggest drawbacks was its fuel consumption. The car's excessive weight, combined with the underpowered engine, made it a notorious gas guzzler. At a time when fuel efficiency was becoming a growing concern for many buyers, the Roadmaster's dismal mileage was a significant drawback. Its large engine worked overtime to haul the massive body around, leading to frequent stops at the gas station. In a post-war world where the economy was shifting, the Roadmaster's thirst for fuel began to seem more like a burden than a luxury. In terms of competition, the Roadmaster found itself outclassed by other luxury cars that managed to offer better performance and handling without sacrificing style. Cadillac, for example, was producing vehicles that combined both power and elegance, and Chrysler's Hemi Civ8 engines were dominating in terms of raw performance. In this crowded luxury market, the Roadmaster struggled to stand out. It offered plenty of comfort and visual appeal, but when it came to driving dynamics, it lagged behind its rivals. Buyers who wanted more than just a stylish cruiser quickly turned to cars that could deliver both power and sophistication. Another issue that plagued the 1953 Buick Roadmaster was its size relative to the increasingly urbanized American landscape. While its grand proportions might have made sense in an era of wide-open highways and spacious suburban garages, the car's unwieldy dimensions became a drawback for city drivers. Parking the Roadmaster in tight spaces was a nightmare, and navigating congested urban streets was a stressful, lumbering endeavor. In an era when more compact and efficient cars were beginning to gain popularity, the Roadmaster felt like a relic of an earlier time, oversized, inefficient, and out of sync with the evolving needs of American drivers. Despite its shortcomings, the Roadmaster did have its fans. Those who valued luxury above all else appreciated its spacious interior and smooth ride. It was the kind of car that made a statement simply by existing, rolling down the street like a parade float, showcasing its owner's status. Buick's marketing emphasized this sense of prestige, painting the Roadmaster as the ultimate symbol of post-war success and affluence. But beneath that gleaming exterior, the reality was that the car's performance didn't live up to the hype. Ultimately, the 1953 Buick Roadmaster serves as an example of how excess can sometimes overshadow functionality. In its quest to be the biggest and the most luxurious, Buick created a car that sacrificed too much in terms of performance and practicality. The 1957 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham was intended to be the crown jewel of American luxury automobiles, a car that represented the height of technological advancement and opulence in the automotive world. It was a vehicle that boldly declared Cadillac's intention to dominate not just in terms of style, but also in engineering innovation. With its sleek, futuristic design, stainless steel roof, and array of cutting-edge features, the Eldorado Brougham seemed to have everything a buyer could want in a luxury car. It was a marvel on paper, a vehicle that promised a new era of driving comfort and technological sophistication. However, reality often paints a more complicated picture, and in the case of the Eldorado Brougham, that picture was one of frequent headaches, unreliable components, and costly repairs. The Eldorado Brougham's allure began with its stunning exterior design. With its low-slung profile, distinctive tail fins, and clean, elegant lines, the car looked like it had been plucked from a sci-fi dream of the future. Its stainless steel roof was a unique and eye-catching feature that added to its space-age appeal, giving the car an air of durability and distinction. Cadillac wanted this car to turn heads, and it certainly did. When it was unveiled, the Eldorado Brougham was one of the most expensive cars on the market, priced at a jaw-dropping $13,074, more than double the cost of a standard Cadillac at the time. This price was justified by the laundry list of advanced features packed into the car, each of which was designed to wow buyers with its promise of effortless luxury. Inside, the Eldorado Brougham continued to impress, at least at first glance. The interior was a blend of the finest materials, from leather to chrome accents, and it was equipped with amenities that were unheard of in most cars of the era. It featured air conditioning, automatic memory seats, power windows, and a variety of other electric gadgets that were designed to make the driving experience as comfortable and luxurious as possible. The car's pièce de résistance was its air suspension system, a revolutionary technology that was intended to provide an ultra-smooth ride by adjusting the suspension according to road conditions. It also came with magnetic latches on the glove box, perfume atomizers, and even a set of cocktail glasses and a magnetic tray. Cadillac had clearly spared no expense in making this car the ultimate symbol of wealth and status. Yet it was precisely these ambitious innovations that would become the Eldorado Brougham's downfall. While the car was a technological marvel on paper, in practice, many of its advanced features were plagued by reliability issues. The air suspension system, which was meant to deliver a magic carpet-like ride, was particularly troublesome. Drivers reported that the system would frequently malfunction, causing the car to sag or bounce unpredictably. Repairing the air suspension was both expensive and time-consuming, and many owners eventually replaced it with conventional coil springs just to avoid the headaches. The automatic memory seats, another luxury feature that was meant to remember the driver's preferred seating position, were similarly prone to failure. These seats would often get stuck or fail to adjust properly, leaving drivers in uncomfortable positions. The electrically operated systems in the car, while impressive for their time, were also notoriously unreliable. Power windows would jam, and the automatic trunk mechanism, meant to open with the push of a button, would frequently refuse to cooperate. These problems made what should have been a smooth, effortless driving experience into a constant battle with technology that wasn't quite ready for prime time. Mechanically, the Eldorado Brougham was no less problematic. The car's complexity made it difficult to maintain, and even experienced mechanics struggled with its various systems. Routine maintenance quickly became a nightmare, with repairs often requiring specialized knowledge and parts that were expensive and hard to come by. Owners who had purchased the car expecting the epitome of luxury instead found themselves dealing with a constant stream of mechanical issues that drained their wallets and their patience. Adding to the frustration was the fact that the car's performance didn't quite live up to its luxurious promises. Despite its 365 cubic inch V8 engine, the Eldorado Brougham was hampered by its weight. At over 5,000 pounds, it was a heavy vehicle, and this affected both its handling and fuel economy. While the car was powerful, it wasn't particularly fast or nimble, and drivers found it sluggish compared to some of its lighter, more performance-oriented competitors. The Eldorado Brougham's luxurious ride came at the expense of agility, and for many buyers, the trade-off wasn't worth the trouble. The 1955 Nash Rambler, a compact car designed with economy and practicality in mind, entered the market at a time when American buyers were more enamored with large, powerful vehicles that symbolized post-war prosperity. The Rambler was part of Nash's strategy to offer something different from the gargantuan sedans and coupes of the era, banking on the idea that some consumers might be drawn to its smaller size, fuel efficiency, and ease of parking. However, this forward-thinking approach came at a cost, both literally and figuratively. In the booming automotive market of the 1950s, where chrome-drenched, tail-fin-wielding behemoths ruled the roads, the Nash Rambler stood out for all the wrong reasons. At just over 175 inches in length, the Rambler was one of the smallest cars on the market, dwarfed by the massive sedans and station wagons that were highly coveted by American families. Its compact dimensions made it more suitable for European or urban driving environments, but in the wide-open spaces of American highways and suburbs, it looked out of place. Buyers wanted cars that could comfortably accommodate a family, along with luggage, and still have room to spare. Unfortunately, the Rambler's diminutive size made it less than ideal for this kind of utility, and it quickly developed a reputation as a car for people who either couldn't afford something bigger or who were too far ahead of their time. One of the Rambler's key selling points was its fuel economy. While most of its contemporaries were gas guzzlers, the Rambler's smaller engine meant it consumed far less fuel. In an era of cheap gas, however, fuel economy wasn't much of a concern for American consumers. They were far more interested in raw power. And here is where the Nash Rambler faltered the most. Its engine, a modest inline-six, produced just 82 horsepower, which was significantly underpowered compared to the V8 engines that had become the standard in mid-century American cars. This made the Rambler sluggish on highways, struggling to keep up with the more muscular vehicles cruising down Route 66. In an age where speed and power were equated with status, the Rambler's weak engine left it in the dust. The Rambler's compact size also made it less comfortable for long-distance travel. While it had enough room for city commuting or short trips, it wasn't designed for the kind of cross-country road trips that many American families were taking during the 1950s. Space was tight, especially for families with children, and the car's suspension system didn't provide the smooth, cushioned ride that larger vehicles offered. Passengers frequently complained about cramped interiors, and its small trunk left little room for luggage or other essentials, making it even less practical for road trips. In addition to its size and power limitations, the Rambler's design was seen as uninspiring. Its boxy, utilitarian shape was a stark contrast to the flowing lines, chrome accents, and flashy tail fins that adorned many of its competitors. While the Rambler was undoubtedly functional, it lacked the visual appeal that drew buyers to other brands. Cars of the era were as much about style and status as they were about transportation, and the Nash Rambler simply didn't make the bold statement that American consumers were looking for. Its plain, conservative design failed to captivate the imagination of a car-buying public that was increasingly influenced by the glitz and glamour of automotive design. Despite these shortcomings, the Nash Rambler wasn't entirely without merit. It was affordable, reliable, and well-suited for the practical, no-nonsense driver who prioritized function over form. It found some success among budget-conscious buyers and those living in cities where its small size and fuel efficiency were seen as advantages. However, these buyers represented a small segment of the market. Most Americans, swept up in the post-war economic boom, had their sights set on bigger, faster, and flashier cars. The Rambler, with its modest features and underwhelming performance, was simply out of step with the automotive desires of the time. In hindsight, the Nash Rambler can be seen as a car that was ahead of its time, foreshadowing the later rise in popularity of compact and fuel-efficient vehicles during the oil crises of the 1970s. However, in the mid-1950s, the market was simply not ready for such a car. American consumers were enjoying unprecedented prosperity, and the Nash Rambler's emphasis on economy and practicality did little to win them over. Ultimately, the 1955 Nash Rambler was a car that tried to swim against the tide of American automotive trends. It was small, efficient, and affordable, traits that would later become highly desirable. But in the booming, power-hungry market of the 1950s, it was simply too ahead of its time. It wasn't what the public wanted, and its sales reflected that miscalculation. The 1952 Studebaker Commander, with its bold bullet-nose design, was an ambitious attempt by Studebaker to set itself apart in the rapidly evolving automotive market of the early 1950s. At a time when post-war America was hungry for modern, forward-thinking designs, Studebaker hoped that the Commander's unique look would attract buyers who were eager for something that stood out from the crowd. Unfortunately, their gamble on the radical design didn't pay off as planned. The bullet nose front, which had been introduced in the 1950 and 1951 models, was meant to evoke a sense of aviation-inspired futurism. It was reminiscent of airplanes and jet engines, reflecting the era's fascination with speed, technology, and the future. However, by 1952, this styling choice had already begun to feel dated, and many buyers found it more perplexing than innovative. The rounded, protruding nose contrasted sharply with the more streamlined and sleek designs coming from competitors like Ford and Chevrolet. Where other cars featured long, flowing lines and wide grills, the Commander's bulbous front end seemed odd and awkward, leaving many potential buyers scratching their heads. While some automobile enthusiasts appreciated the daring design, it was simply too polarizing for the mass market. The Commander's front end disrupted the otherwise standard sedan shape, and the disjointed look made the car less appealing to consumers who were becoming more style-conscious. Car buyers in the early 1950s were looking for vehicles that embodied modern elegance, not quirky eccentricities, and the Commander's appearance didn't deliver the sophistication that was increasingly in demand. Beyond its unusual exterior, the 1952 Studebaker Commander didn't do much to compensate for its odd looks with stellar performance. Mechanically, it was competent but unremarkable. Under the hood, the Commander featured a V8 engine, which was powerful enough for the time, but it didn't stand out in a market where competitors were beginning to push boundaries in terms of power and innovation. The car's driving experience was solid, but lacked the refinement or punch that buyers expected from a high-performance vehicle. It didn't offer the same thrill as some of its rivals, making it easy to overlook in a crowded market. The interior of the Studebaker Commander also left something to be desired. While it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable, it was far from luxurious. The materials used in the cabin were serviceable, but lacked the plush feel of cars from more upscale manufacturers. The Commander's interior was functional, but with the rise of more comfortable and stylish interiors from competitors, it was clear that Studebaker had fallen behind the curve. Buyers who sat inside a Commander were not likely to be wowed by the experience, especially when compared to the competition's more polished offerings. Additionally, the car's handling and performance, while acceptable, were not enough to make up for its aesthetic shortcomings. It didn't perform poorly, but neither did it excel. The Commander's steering and suspension were adequate for the time, but in an era when cars were becoming more refined in both design and engineering, adequate wasn't enough to captivate buyers. Its average performance did little to overshadow the car's strange appearance, leaving it stuck in the middle of the pack, a forgettable option in a sea of more appealing vehicles. The Commander's failure was especially painful for Studebaker, a company that had built a strong reputation for producing quality vehicles in the first half of the 20th century. While Studebaker had enjoyed success in earlier decades, the post-war years were proving to be a difficult period for the brand. As larger manufacturers like Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler continued to grow and innovate, smaller companies like Studebaker struggled to keep pace. The Commander's failure to capture the public's imagination in 1952 was a reflection of the broader challenges the company was facing. Its designs were becoming increasingly out of touch with what consumers wanted. Despite these challenges, Studebaker continued to produce cars throughout the 1950s, but the Commander's awkward design remained a symbol of the company's struggle to modernize. By trying to be bold and different, Studebaker missed the mark with the Commander, and the result was a car that alienated more buyers than it attracted. In retrospect, the 1952 Commander stands as a reminder of the dangers of confusing innovation with good design. In the end, the 1952 Studebaker Commander was a car that tried to be forward-thinking, but ended up looking like an awkward relic. Its bullet-nose design, which had initially been introduced to great fanfare, quickly fell out of favor as buyers gravitated toward more sleek, sophisticated vehicles. The 1954 Plymouth Belvedere entered the market at a time when the American auto industry was booming, with consumers craving stylish, powerful cars that reflected the post-war prosperity. Chrysler's Plymouth division aimed to position the Belvedere as a mid-range model, offering a combination of style and affordability. However, what was supposed to be a car that balanced looks and performance ended up being a major disappointment for buyers due to its poor handling, underwhelming engine, and overall lack of excitement. At first glance, the Belvedere seemed to offer what mid-century car buyers wanted: a sleek, modern design with eye-catching chrome details and a spacious interior. It was Plymouth's attempt to compete in the highly competitive mid-range sedan market, going head-to-head with the likes of Ford's Fairlane and Chevrolet's Bel Air. However, beneath its stylish exterior, the Belvedere couldn't hide its fundamental flaws. The primary issue with the 1954 Plymouth Belvedere was its performance. The car came equipped with a flathead, six-cylinder engine that was significantly less powerful than the V8 engines offered by many of its competitors. While the flathead engine had been reliable for Plymouth in the past, by 1954, it was simply outdated. It lacked the horsepower to keep up with the increasingly powerful cars that were being produced by Ford and Chevrolet. In an era when Americans were becoming more focused on speed and power, the Belvedere's engine made it feel sluggish and uninspiring to drive. The car's heavy body only compounded the problem. Weighing in at over 3,200 pounds, the Belvedere struggled to move with any real agility. Its acceleration was slow, and it had difficulty handling tight turns or quick maneuvers. This made it feel clumsy and unresponsive on the road, which frustrated drivers who were looking for a more dynamic driving experience. Compared to lighter, more powerful cars in the same price range, the Belvedere felt like a relic of an earlier time, unable to keep up with the demands of the modern consumer. The handling issues were further exacerbated by the car's suspension system, which was not as refined as that of its rivals. The ride quality in the Belvedere was often described as stiff and uncomfortable, particularly on rough roads. Where competitors had begun to focus on smoother rides and better road manners, Plymouth seemed to have missed the memo. This made the Belvedere less appealing to families and individuals who valued comfort on long trips. Additionally, the car's transmission system didn't do much to redeem its lackluster performance. The 3-speed manual transmission was functional but unsophisticated, and it didn't offer the smooth shifting experience that buyers had begun to expect from their cars. While automatic transmissions were becoming more common in the industry, the Belvedere's standard manual option felt outdated, further alienating buyers who were looking for the latest conveniences in their vehicles. While the 1954 Belvedere's exterior design was considered attractive, it wasn't enough to overcome the car's mechanical shortcomings. The styling, with its clean lines and chrome accents, gave the car a modern look, but in a decade defined by the bold design of tail fins and futuristic curves, the Belvedere wasn't quite daring enough to stand out. It occupied a middle ground, attractive but not revolutionary. In an increasingly competitive market, this wasn't enough to draw attention away from its mechanical issues. Inside, the Belvedere offered adequate space, but the materials and layout were underwhelming compared to competitors in the same price range. The seats were comfortable enough for short trips, but lacked the plush luxury of higher-end models. The dashboard, while functional, lacked the style and innovation seen in other cars. It was clear that Plymouth had focused on cost-cutting measures inside the cabin, and buyers noticed. As a result, the Belvedere didn't offer the sense of excitement or indulgence that many mid-range buyers were looking for in the 1950s. In terms of market performance, the Belvedere didn't hold up well against its competition. Consumers who initially considered the car quickly turned their attention to more exciting and better-performing options like the Chevrolet Bel Air, which was not only faster but also more stylish and comfortable. The Bel Air's powerful V8 engine in smooth ride left the Belvedere in the dust, and Ford's Fairlane also offered more dynamic handling and a more refined interior at a similar price point. By the time the 1954 Belvedere hit the market, it was clear that Plymouth had failed to capture the spirit of the times. The company was playing catch-up in a rapidly evolving industry, and the Belvedere felt like an outdated offering in a sea of innovative designs. The 1950 Ford Crestliner was introduced as a premium trim option, designed to give buyers the impression of exclusivity and sportiness, but the reality was far less impressive. At first glance, the Crestliner seemed like a stylish departure from the standard Ford sedan lineup, sporting a two-tone paint job and a vinyl roof, features meant to elevate its visual appeal. However, beyond these aesthetic flourishes, the Crestliner was essentially just a dressed-up version of Ford's mainstream models, with little in the way of mechanical or technological innovation to justify its higher price tag. One of the most striking issues with the Ford Crestliner was its lack of performance enhancements. The car came equipped with the same flathead V8 engine that was offered in the regular Ford lineup, a power plant that, while reliable, was already becoming outdated by 1950. With its modest 100 horsepower output, the engine struggled to deliver the kind of performance buyers were expecting from a car that was marketed as a premium, sporty model. There was no improvement in acceleration or handling over the standard Ford sedans, which left many buyers feeling underwhelmed by the driving experience. In an era when automakers like Oldsmobile were introducing high-compression V8 engines, the Crestliner's flathead V8 felt like a relic from a bygone era. In terms of handling, the Crestliner was equally disappointing. The car's suspension and steering systems were virtually unchanged from the base Ford sedan models, offering a ride that was adequate but far from sporty or refined. The car's weight distribution, coupled with its soft suspension setup, made for a less responsive drive, particularly when cornering or driving at higher speeds. This lack of agility meant that the Crestliner was no more fun to drive than a standard family sedan, a fact that didn't sit well with buyers looking for something that could match its stylish appearance. The two-tone exterior and vinyl roof, while visually distinctive, were essentially gimmicks designed to mask the car's underlying mediocrity. These styling cues gave the car a premium look, but they didn't address any of the fundamental issues that plagued the vehicle. The vinyl roof, in particular, was prone to wear and tear, often fading or cracking after prolonged exposure to the elements, further detracting from the car's appeal. Beneath its flashy exterior, the Crestliner's body was identical to that of the standard Ford sedans, meaning that it offered no real advantage in terms of aerodynamics, weight reduction, or structural integrity. Inside, the Crestliner offered little to distinguish itself from the standard models in Ford's lineup. The interior was modest, with basic materials and finishes that didn't live up to the car's premium price tag, while it featured a few extra touches like upgraded upholstery and chrome accents. These were superficial changes that did nothing to improve the overall comfort or functionality of the cabin. There was no significant improvement in ergonomics, space utilization, or build quality, leaving buyers with the sense that they were paying more for the appearance of luxury rather than any tangible benefits. Perhaps the biggest issue with the Ford Crestliner was its failure to innovate. By 1950, the automotive industry was beginning to see significant advancements in technology, with competitors introducing features like automatic transmissions, power steering, and more powerful, efficient engines. The Crestliner, on the other hand, offered none of these advancements. Its 3-speed manual transmission was adequate but unremarkable, and there were no options for power steering or brakes, which were becoming increasingly common in the industry. As a result, the Crestliner felt dated from the moment it rolled off the assembly line. In the end, the Ford Crestliner's styling gimmicks weren't enough to disguise its mediocrity. Buyers quickly saw through the flashy exterior and realized that beneath the surface, the car offered little more than a standard Ford sedan with a higher price tag. While it may have turned heads initially with its two-tone paint and vinyl roof, the Crestliner's lack of performance, innovation, and overall refinement meant that it failed to leave a lasting impression in the highly competitive market of the early 1950s. Ultimately, the Crestliner serves as a cautionary tale of style over substance, a car that tried to distract buyers with visual flair, but couldn't deliver where it mattered most, on the road. The 1956 Continental Mark II was a bold attempt by Ford to reintroduce American luxury in the post-war automotive market, but it became infamous for one glaring flaw: its price tag. Positioned as an ultra-premium offering, the Mark II was crafted with meticulous attention to detail, designed to embody the pinnacle of automotive elegance and sophistication. Yet despite its undeniable allure, the car's astronomical cost, nearly equivalent to a Rolls-Royce at the time, made it a financial blunder for Ford and a commercial failure in the marketplace. At the heart of the Continental Mark II's problem was its price, $10,000 in 1956, which is equivalent to over $100,000 today. This positioned it in the uppermost echelon of luxury automobiles, a space traditionally occupied by European marques like Rolls-Royce and Bentley. For an American car company to charge such a premium was unprecedented. The intent was clear: to create an automobile that was the absolute best of American craftsmanship, something that could stand toe-to-toe with the finest vehicles in the world. And in many ways, the Mark II delivered. Its build quality was extraordinary, with hand-finished details, an impeccable interior, and a powerful yet smooth V8 engine. But as beautiful and luxurious as the Continental Mark II was, it faced an insurmountable obstacle. Exclusivity came at too high a price. The car's construction was a labor-intensive process, involving a significant amount of manual craftsmanship, which only added to its production costs. Every part of the Mark II was subject to stringent quality control. Its body panels were hand-fitted, and each car was subjected to rigorous testing. This approach ensured that the Continental was built to an incredibly high standard, but it also made the car prohibitively expensive to produce. Ford was losing money on every Mark II sold, even at its sky-high retail price. From a design perspective, the Continental Mark II was stunning. Its long, low body exuded an understated elegance that was the antithesis of the flashy, chrome-laden designs popular at the time. It wasn't trying to overwhelm with gimmicks or excessive ornamentation. Instead, it emphasized clean lines and a dignified presence. The car's restrained styling was meant to evoke timeless luxury, and in that regard, it succeeded. The Mark II was a masterpiece of automotive design, with a refined, minimalist aesthetic that still resonates with collectors today. Inside, the car was equally impressive. The cabin was a symphony of leather, chrome, and top-tier materials, all tailored with the utmost precision. Each Mark II was equipped with features that were cutting-edge for the era, including power windows, power steering, and air conditioning. The seats were crafted from the finest hides, and the dashboard was a blend of modern technology and classic luxury. Passengers were cocooned in an environment that felt like a private club on wheels, a space where no expense had been spared. However, the car's luxurious appointments and exclusivity couldn't overcome its prohibitive cost. The Continental Mark II was simply out of reach for most consumers. In the post-war era, even wealthy buyers were cautious about splurging on such extravagant vehicles. The American market wasn't quite ready for a domestic car that competed directly with the likes of Rolls-Royce, especially not at a time when Cadillacs and Lincolns offered substantial luxury for far less money. Despite its brilliance, the Mark II failed to capture the imagination of enough buyers to make it profitable. Adding to its challenges, the Continental Mark II was caught in an awkward position between Ford's mass-market appeal and Lincoln's established luxury image. While Continental was technically its own brand, buyers were often confused about its place in the market. Was it a Lincoln, a Ford, or something entirely different? This branding ambiguity didn't help its cause. People were hesitant to spend Rolls-Royce-level money on a car that was still associated with Ford, a brand traditionally seen as producing more affordable, practical vehicles. In terms of performance, the Continental Mark II was competent but not groundbreaking. Its 368 cubic inch V8 engine produced 285 horsepower, which allowed for smooth acceleration and respectable top speeds. However, at nearly 5,000 pounds, the Mark II was a heavy vehicle, and while it offered a comfortable ride, it didn't have the nimble handling or exhilarating performance that buyers might expect from a car in its price range. In a sense, it was more of a grand cruiser than a performance machine, ideal for long, leisurely drives rather than spirited motoring. The 1951 Frazer Manhattan is often remembered as a car that simply couldn't keep up with the changing times. While it had once been a symbol of post-war American optimism and luxury, by the early 50s, the Frazer Manhattan was hopelessly outdated, both in terms of design and engineering. The automotive landscape was evolving rapidly, with manufacturers introducing sleeker, more advanced models that left the bulky, old-fashioned Manhattan looking like a relic from a bygone era. In its earlier years, the Frazer Manhattan had enjoyed a degree of success, particularly due to its high-end features and the brand's reputation for quality. Launched in 1947, it was part of the ambitious vision of the Kaiser Frazer Corporation, a company that sought to challenge the dominance of the big three automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, by offering stylish, innovative vehicles. At the time, the Manhattan's spacious interior, quality materials, and smooth ride made it appealing to middle-class buyers looking for something a bit more refined than the average Ford or Chevy. However, by 1951, the automotive world had moved on. The Frazer Manhattan's design, which had once seemed modern, was now hopelessly outdated. Its large, heavy body, with its tall roofline and wide proportions, looked clumsy compared to the sleek, low-slung designs coming from Detroit. Cars like the Chevrolet Bel Air and the Ford Crestliner were capturing the public's imagination with their chrome-laden exteriors, futuristic fins, and powerful V8 engines. The Manhattan, with its staid, boxy appearance and aging inline-six engine, simply couldn't compete. One of the car's biggest problems was that it hadn't evolved significantly since its introduction. While other automakers were pushing the boundaries of automotive design and technology, the Frazer Manhattan was still relying on the same basic platform and engineering that had debuted in the late 40s. This made the car feel dated, both in terms of styling and performance. Its handling was sluggish, and its outdated suspension system didn't provide the smooth, comfortable ride that buyers had come to expect from modern cars. Under the hood, the Frazer Manhattan was equally unimpressive. While it was equipped with a durable and reliable 226 cubic inch inline-six engine, it lacked the power and refinement of the V8 engines that were becoming increasingly common in American cars. With only 115 horsepower, the Manhattans struggled to keep up with the performance standards of the day. It was slow off the line, and its acceleration left much to be desired. On the highway, it felt underpowered, particularly when compared to the V8-powered competition that was dominating the market. Fuel efficiency wasn't much of a selling point either, as the Manhattan's hefty frame required a substantial amount of gas to move. At a time when more compact, efficient vehicles were starting to gain traction, the Frazer Manhattan felt like an inefficient throwback to an earlier era. Its fuel consumption, combined with its lackluster performance, made it a tough sell for buyers who wanted both power and economy. Another issue that plagued the 1951 Frazer Manhattan was its price. As a premium offering from the Kaiser Frazer Corporation, the Manhattan was positioned as a luxury vehicle, but by 1951, it no longer offered the kind of features that buyers expected from a high-end car. While it had a well-appointed interior with plush upholstery and quality materials, it didn't offer any of the cutting-edge technology that was starting to appear in other luxury vehicles. Power windows, power steering, and automatic transmissions were becoming increasingly common in higher-end cars, but the Manhattan didn't have these features. As a result, it seemed overpriced for what it offered. The competition didn't make things any easier for the Frazer Manhattan. By the early 1950s, the big three automakers were in full swing, producing vehicles that were not only more stylish and powerful, but also more affordable. Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler had the advantage of economies of scale, allowing them to offer more for less, while smaller manufacturers like Kaiser Frazer struggled to keep up. Buyers who once might have considered a Frazer Manhattan were now flocking to showrooms to check out the latest models from the big automakers, leaving the Manhattan to gather dust on dealership lots. Kaiser Frazer had high hopes for the Manhattan, but by 1951, the company itself was facing financial difficulties. Unable to invest in the kind of research and development needed to keep the Manhattan competitive, Kaiser Frazer was forced to rely on outdated designs and engineering, which only exacerbated the car's problems. As sales continued to decline, it became clear that the Frazer Manhattan's time had passed. The 1958 Edsel Pacer is perhaps one of the most infamous examples of an automaker's failure to read the market. A symbol of how overhype, poor design choices, and misguided marketing can converge to disastrous effect. Ford's Edsel division is now widely regarded as one of the biggest blunders in automotive history, and the Pacer, positioned as a mid-range offering in the lineup, was no exception. While Ford had high hopes that the Edsel would revolutionize the market, the Pacer, and the entire Edsel line, ultimately failed to live up to the lofty expectations the company had built around it. At its core, the Edsel Pacer was a car that didn't know what it wanted to be. Marketed as a mid-range vehicle, it was meant to fill a niche between Ford's more affordable models and its higher-end Mercury line. However, instead of offering something unique or innovative, the Pacer simply recycled existing technology and parts from other Ford models, while slapping on a gaudy, controversial design that alienated more buyers than it attracted. For a car that was supposed to embody the future of automotive luxury and performance, the Pacer failed on both counts. One of the biggest reasons the Edsel Pacer flopped so dramatically was its ill-conceived styling. The Edsel mark was designed to stand out, but in all the wrong ways. The car's infamous horse collar grille, a vertical, oval-shaped design that resembled either a toilet seat or a set of buck teeth, depending on whom you asked, became a punchline rather than a design icon. While Ford had hoped that the Edsel's unique look would appeal to buyers looking for something different, it ended up being widely mocked and ridiculed. The grille was just the most prominent design flaw. The car's overall proportions felt awkward and overdone, with excessive chrome accents and strange fin-like rear fenders that didn't fit well with the rest of the design. While the Pacer's odd appearance was off-putting, its performance didn't do much to redeem it either. The car was built on a Ford platform and offered a standard V8 engine, but it didn't live up to the expectations of a luxury vehicle. For a car positioned as a mid-range option with premium aspirations, its performance felt lackluster. The engine provided decent power, but the car was heavy and sluggish, with poor handling and a less than smooth ride. Buyers looking for a refined driving experience were quickly disappointed, especially since many of Edsel's competitors offered more powerful, better handling cars for a similar price. The price tag was another major factor in the Pacer's downfall. As a mid-range offering, the Pacer was supposed to strike a balance between affordability and luxury, but instead it ended up being too expensive for the average buyer without offering enough to justify the cost. At a time when consumers were becoming more price-conscious, especially with a looming recession on the horizon, the Edsel Pacer seemed like a bad deal. Buyers quickly realized they could get more car for their money by going with established brands like Chevrolet, Buick, or even Ford's own lower-priced models. The Pacer, like other Edsel models, also suffered from quality control issues. Despite being heavily marketed as a state-of-the-art vehicle with cutting-edge technology, the Edsel was plagued by mechanical problems from the start. Reports of faulty transmissions, electrical issues, and poor build quality began to surface shortly after the cars hit the market. The much-touted push-button Teletouch transmission, which was supposed to be a selling point for the car, often malfunctioned, adding to the frustrations of owners. These issues, combined with the car's underwhelming performance, only served to sour the public's perception of the Pacer. Another key factor in the Edsel Pacer's failure was the sheer amount of overhype and marketing that surrounded its launch. Ford had invested millions of dollars into the Edsel project, building up a massive amount of anticipation in the years leading up to its debut. The Edsel was billed as the car of the future, with promises of revolutionary design and groundbreaking technology. However, when the Pacer and its sibling models finally arrived, they couldn't live up to the high expectations that had been set. Buyers who had been drawn in by the hype quickly realized that the Pacer was little more than a restyled Ford with some gimmicky features and a higher price tag. The combination of overpromising and underdelivering led to a public relations disaster for Ford. The Edsel name quickly became synonymous with failure, and the Pacer, as a mid-range model, was caught in the middle of the fiasco. Positioned as neither affordable enough for budget-conscious buyers nor luxurious enough for those seeking a premium experience, the Pacer fell into a kind of no man's land, appealing to almost no one. The 1955 Plymouth Plaza was meant to appeal to budget-conscious buyers, but it ended up being a textbook example of how cost-cutting can go too far. In an era when American cars were known for their flamboyant designs, chrome-laden exteriors, and powerful engines, the Plaza stood out for all the wrong reasons. It was plain, unexciting, and lacked the essential features that made other cars of the time desirable. It was the kind of car that, while affordable, left buyers feeling like they were getting the short end of the stick. At a time when automakers were capitalizing on the post-war boom, the Plaza seemed to buck the trend of opulence and style. Its design was utilitarian at best and dull at worst. The exterior was devoid of any real flair or elegance, with minimal chrome detailing and boxy proportions that didn't do much to stir excitement. It was the kind of car that blended into the background, completely overshadowed by its more stylish competitors like the Chevrolet Bel Air or the Ford Fairlane. In a decade defined by automotive exuberance, the Plaza seemed almost apologetic for its existence. Inside, things didn't get much better. The Plaza was stripped down to the basics, with a bare-bones interior that felt more utilitarian than comfortable. Plastic fittings, hard vinyl seats, and minimal instrumentation made it clear that this was a car built with a tight budget in mind. Buyers who were used to the more luxurious options available in even mid-range models were often disappointed by the Plaza's Spartan accommodations. There was nothing inviting or comforting about the interior, which only served to reinforce the perception that the Plaza was a cheap car in the worst sense of the word. Performance-wise, the Plaza also left much to be desired. It was equipped with an underpowered engine that struggled to keep up with the larger, more robust V8s that were becoming standard across the industry. Its straight-six engine, while economical, lacked the punch needed to make driving enjoyable or even competitive. Highway speeds were a challenge for the Plaza, and its sluggish acceleration made it feel out of step with the growing power craze of the 1950s. For many buyers, the performance gap between the Plaza and its rivals was a deal-breaker, especially in a market where horsepower was king. What made the Plaza's shortcomings even more glaring was the fact that it arrived in an era of innovation and excitement in the auto industry. By 1955, the American car market was booming with designs that captured the imagination. Tail fins were growing, engines were getting more powerful, and every new model seemed to promise an even more exciting driving experience. In this context, the Plymouth Plaza felt like a relic of an earlier time, a throwback to an era when cars were simply functional machines rather than symbols of status or style. The Plaza's low price tag was supposed to be its main selling point, but even that wasn't enough to overcome its many faults. Buyers who were looking for affordability often found that they had to sacrifice too much in terms of style, comfort, and performance. It was a car that, while practical, failed to inspire any real enthusiasm. In an era when cars were as much about making a statement as they were about getting from point A to point B, the Plaza made no statement at all. It was simply there. Despite its best intentions, the Plaza quickly became overshadowed by more exciting, better-designed models from competitors. Ford's entry-level cars offered more style and better performance, while Chevrolet managed to balance affordability with flair in a way that the Plaza never could. Even within Plymouth's own lineup, the Plaza was seen as the least desirable option, often losing out to the more popular Belvedere or Savoy models, which offered more features and a stronger visual presence on the road. In the end, the 1955 Plymouth Plaza was a car that failed to connect with the aspirations of American consumers. While it may have appealed to those who were simply looking for the most affordable option, It was unable to capture the hearts of buyers who wanted more than just basic transportation. It was a car built to meet a price point, but in doing so, it sacrificed too much: style, comfort, performance, and ultimately, desirability. Today, the Plaza is remembered more as a cautionary tale than a classic. It's a reminder that sometimes cutting corners to achieve a low price can backfire, especially in a market where buyers are looking for excitement and innovation. These cars from the 1950s each failed for different reasons, from bad design choices to poor engineering. Some were ahead of their time but couldn't find their place in the market, while others were simply outclassed by better competitors. Together, they form a gallery of automotive missteps that show even the big names can make big mistakes.